I stand here with hands raised to you. Oh yeah, let your Ruach blow through. Here, heart and hand to renew. Oh my King, set me free to worship you. Your hand calmed the winds, you split the mighty seas. Mountains bow down in worship, yet you know my name. You give life to my dry bones, they stand to their feet. You have called me worthy, I will serve you all my days. I stand here with hands raised to you. Oh yeah, let your Ruach blow through. Here, heart and hand to renew. Oh my King, set me free to worship you. Your hand calms the winds, you split the mighty seas. Mountains bow down in worship, yet you know my name. You give life to my dry bones, they stand to their feet. You have called me worthy, I will serve you all my days. Your hand calms the winds, you split the mighty seas. Mountains bow down in worship, yet you know my name. You give life to my dry bones, they stand to their feet. You have called me worthy, I will serve you all my days. I will serve you all my days. I will serve you all my days. I will serve you all my days.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. And I am truly so excited. We are out of the gate, if you will, and we are embarking on a very special journey in the book of Isaiah, being presented by Matthew Nolan with Torah to the Tribes. This study is a huge undertaking, and it is full of life applications for us today, not only back then when Isaiah lived, but for us today. It is my desire that we attain Yahuah's wisdom and insights from his living word to navigate the relentless sieges we face every day. I'm looking forward, truly looking forward to unpacking this foundational introduction prior to our Isaiah study, because I feel like this is so important. If we don't really grasp all that was shared in the introduction, we're going to miss out. We will see that by attaining ascended self-mastery in Yahusha, We rise above our present circumstances and attain Yahuah's perspective on what we face on earth. Do we not ascend before his throne daily for wisdom with thanksgiving and praise? Absolutely we do. By doing so, we will not only survive our time on this earth, but we will thrive. In my opinion, this will be like the sequel study to the One New Man done by Torah to the Tribes, but on steroids. And if you haven't viewed the One New Man series by Matthew Nolan, be sure to do that. I even have a playlist that goes into the One New Man study in even greater depth. I'll try to leave those links below in the description section. This study will be full of power and challenges. It too will focus our mind, will, and emotions of dying to self-will and living for thy will be done. It will be about our soul realm submitting to his spirit within us to rein control over our emotions and harness that power to build up strength, move us forward, and not throw us down. So today we will unpack the introduction to Isaiah by Torah to the Tribes, presented by Matthew Nolan. We will look at this prelude to our Isaiah study, and we'll look at it in 5 segments. Part 1 will be the segment on the introduction. Part 2, self-mastery. Part 3, the horse and the rider. Part 4, details. Part 5, lessons to learn. And I will leave the original recording links below in the description section as well. And you can download the notes from this session from Torah to the Tribes Isaiah study at torahtothetribes.com. Isaiah is called the evangelical prophet as a large part of his book is inseparably bound with the life and work of the Messiah, both as a prophet and a statesman. Isaiah took an active part in the affairs of Judah during the reigns of Uzziah, Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah. He was contemporary also with the prophets Hosea and Micah. At the lowest estimate, his public career extended over a period of 40 years, but we believe that to be a much greater time period. But that's only at the lowest estimate. According to tradition, he was executed by being sawn asunder during the reign of Manasseh, to which there may be reference in Hebrews chapter 11:37. And we know Manasseh was the son of Hezekiah. So Isaiah ministered for more than 40 years from approximately 740 BCE to after 701 BCE. If you want to read about added details of this period of prophecy, they are found in 2 Kings chapter 15 and 2 Chronicles chapter 26 through chapters 33. So here in part 1 of the introduction of the segments, Matthew reviews the time period of Isaiah. In addition, I have a timeline chart as a visual reference that we will review later. But for now, let's listen to this first segment.
And greetings to the 12 tribes scattered abroad. Baruch Hashem Yahuah. I pray that you are blessed this Sabbath. It is good to be back. I haven't seen many of you since before Sukkot. I hope you enjoyed the Sukkot teachings that we put up. Quite a collection there to keep you busy. And excuse me, true blessings to you all. Greet one another in the chat. Greet one another in the chat as you arrive, and we jumped onto a new stream. I hope you can find us here today. We are embarking on quite an adventure, the book of Isaiah, and this series is entitled Isaiah, the Fifth Gospel. The Fifth Gospel, 66 chapters. Now, bear with me with this, because today's the introduction. And if we've got 54 Torah portions in a year, and we've got 66 books, and I started digging into this and studying this, and quite honestly, I'm like, oh my goodness, I've got so many notes. There's so much material here. It's historical. It's prophetic. There's allegory. There's metaphor. It's literal. Which way do you want to go? I mean, it is historic, but it's historic in the days of the kings. It's historic in the actual time of Isaiah. But then it's historic in the time of Yeshua. Do you realize the book of Isaiah is the most quoted of the prophets in the New Testament? It's everywhere. It's historic in that context, but that's prophecy too. You see, it's a multi-level prophecy. So I've got 66 books. Well, let's just say I do, it takes me 2 weeks to do a chapter. What is that? What is that? Is that like 132 weeks worth of material? That's over 2 years. I'm like, well, we're going to have some serious endurance to get through this. I don't know if you can stick with me. I don't think I can stick with myself for that long. So I can't do it like verse by verse, chapter by chapter, which is initially how I thought I would approach this teaching series. So then I thought, well, hang on a minute. Well, how are the Torah portions taught? Well, sometimes in a Torah portion, you'll have, 5 to 9 chapters. And you're not actually hitting on every single verse. You're looking at something thematic within the text that is being presented for that week. And that's the beauty of teaching the Torah portions year in and year out, is that you can hit the same section of scripture, the same Torah portion, and teach a different theme of it the following year. And you've got endless amounts of material. So I think for us to truly get the most out of this study, not get bogged down in 132 teachings or more, we're going to have to look at this more as a thematic study. We're going to have to look at this as the way that we would teach the Torah portions. So all that to say this is Isaiah, the fifth gospel, the introduction. But it is the introduction part A. So I'm even going to take 2 weeks just to introduce you to what we're about to do so that we can be on the same page together. So I am truly, truly excited about teaching this. It's a massive project. It's something that I've always wanted to do. The book of Yeshayahu in the Hebrew, Isaiah, is a book that I often turn to in my life when I'm going through various trials, tribulations. I find great comfort in it, always have done, as I have the prophet Jeremiah, the book of Yirmiyahu. Often go there, unless I'm feeling extremely melancholy, which does happen, and then, of course, I'll just go see my friend Job. But these are the places that I often find myself reading and reading and reading. And over the summer, I ended up in Isaiah, and I'm like, oh, I need to teach this. I need to teach this. And then I felt convicted to teach it. And so here we are. So jump with me, Isaiah. 66 whopping chapters, and today is the introduction. It is so good to be back. My voice is not going to be at its strongest today, so bear with me if I do have to clear my throat. You know, it's like riding a bicycle, getting back, being mic'd up in studio before the cameras. But that doesn't mean I'm going to be doing big jumps with a great skill set today. So please be patient with me as I get back on the horse, a little rusty. And like I say, got to get the strength back in the voice. So let's first look at a few things in this introduction of Yeshayahu in the Hebrew, Isaiah, and look at the date and the occasion of when this was written. Now, Yeshayahu, Isaiah, ministered for more than 40 years, from around 740 before the Common Era to after 701 before the Common Era. Are we going to be doing camera switching today? Splendid. Just got to make sure I know where I'm looking as well. So now, in your own time, I would fully suggest that you read ahead each week, just like you do with the Torah portions. And what's really nice is you can cross-reference this period of the prophecy with 2 Kings chapter 15, 2 Chronicles chapters 26 through 33. They're the same period. So if you're reading and coming along in this study, you want to spend time in 2 Kings, Melachim Bet, chapter 15, and you want to spend time in 2 Chronicles between the 26th and the 33rd chapter, because Isaiah was a contemporary of the other prophets. He was a contemporary of Elijah. He was a contemporary of Elisha and Hosea and Micah. So these prophets, they were all banging around at the same time, and they were banging up against a lot of the same issues. Now, what we had in the time of this period is Israel had already come into, obviously, the promised land, and they had been there for around 700 years. So we've come out of Egypt, we've crossed over, we've been in the land for 700 years at this point, and things are not going well. They're under the book of the law. Of course, the book of the covenant was breached way back at the golden calf. They are under the schoolmaster. They have been given judges. And then they said they wanted a king. So then they were given kings. But then the kings turned out to be wicked. And then the kingdom split. And then the 10 northern tribes went up north. 10 Israel, collectively known as Ephraim, which later became the 10 lost tribes, scattered into the nations, never to return. And all of 10 Israel's kings were wicked as hell. All of them. Whereas Judah had a smattering of good kings and a lot of bad kings. And this is where we're at in the narrative historically. For their first 400 years in Canaan, of course, the Shoftim, the judges, ruled Israel. Then, for about 120 years, 3 kings ruled Israel specifically. And who are those 3 kings, everybody? Saul, David, and Solomon. But in about 917 before the Common Era, Israel has a civil war, and you have the two-house split, which is a paradigm shift in our understanding. Once you understand the two houses of Israel, that really frames the whole context for your biblical understanding of the prophecies. If you don't understand the split between the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom, and that there's a distinction between all Jews are Israelites, but not all Israelites are Jews. If you don't understand that, then you're forever going to stumble in your interpretation of Scripture. That is primary. All Jews are Israelites, but not all Israelites are Jews. There are 12 tribes which make up Israel. 10 of the northern tribes were scattered into the nations to become mixed up into the pagan nations, and they would be collectively brought back by Moshiach. That's the purpose of Messiah, to bring back the 12 tribes of Israel into the land. Not one tribe, not two tribes, but all 12 tribes, and 12 tribes collectively makes Israel. But at this point in the narrative, we've got the 10 northern tribes split. There's been a civil war, and the two-house split. 10 Israel, the northern kingdom, I'll often call them 10 Israel or Ephraim. 10 Israel had some 18 kings. And all of them were wicked as hell. Wicked as hell. They were bad and they were rebellious. Whereas Judah has some 11 kings during this period before Isaiah Yeshayahu's ministry. And some were good and some were bad. Now, the Assyrians, they took Israel captive in about 721 before the Common Era. And I often say this, and I use this just as a word picture. If something on your truck broke, okay? If something on your truck broke, where would you go on your truck to fix your truck? To the place where it broke, correct? So, where did the kingdom of Israel break? Meaning, when the Assyrians came in to take Israel captive, where did they go? Where did the kingdom break? It broke down in the Galilee. That's where Assyria came in and broke the kingdom and took the captives captive. So when the kingdom's about to be fixed through the coming of the Mashiach, as prophesied by Isaiah, where do you think the Mashiach, the Messiah, would go first to fix the kingdom? Would he go to the Galilee? Did he go to the Galilee? Does the New Testament absolutely, in very clear detail, tell us that he goes to the exact area where the Assyrians broke the kingdom? Because to fix it, you have to go to its point of origin of destruction. Common sense. So that kind of frames where we're going, because the Assyrians took Israel captive from the Galilee down in 721 before the Common Era. Now, we have done a study on Ezekiel in the past, and you know that Ezekiel isn't laid out in chapters. It's laid out in scrolls. But in what is called, in the King Jimmy, the 4th chapter, we see the prophecy where Ezekiel is told to lie on his side. And it's a prophecy about Israel's exile and return. For 390 years in Ezekiel chapter 4, verse 5. But we know from the Torah that the punishment would be times 7, wouldn't it? According to Leviticus chapter 26 and verse 18. So 390 years times 7 means the punishment of exile for the 10 northern tribes, commonly called Ephraim, would be approximately, bear with me, 2,730 years in captivity, which means our exile ended in around 2010 of the Common Era. How many of you since 2010 have woken up to the reality that you are Israel? Some of you have even opened up to the reality that you're of the kingdom of Judah. Some of you have woken, we are starting to wake up to our identity of Torah, Messiah, Sabbath keeping, Israel, all 12 tribes. We're a multi-ethnic group being gathered together in the last days. And most of us came into this since the early 2000s. Torah and Messiah, and the context that we are not religious folk. We are the children of Abraham, Isaac and Jacob, all 12 tribes being gathered together. This happened because the prophecies tell us that our exile would end around 2010 of the Common Era. Now, you have to take into account that we should be witnessing then this healing since 2010. And this period of healing will extend to about 2038 if Mashiach tarries that long. If, and that's a big if, Mashiach tarries that long. Because it says in the scripture, if you do not shema, obey me. And it's mentioned 4 times, that phrase, if you do not shema, obey me, it's mentioned 4 times in reference to 7 times the punishment in Leviticus chapter 26. So 7 times 4 is 28. Meaning in verses 14, 18, 21, and 27. So what we have is we have this 28-year window of patience, of long suffering, where Mashiach is waiting for the redemption, waiting for his people. I believe, and this is just my opinion, and I've told you why I believe this now. I believe that we are in that 28-year period of his long suffering and waiting. That's my opinion, and you don't have to agree with me. But that's how I frame the scripture right now in my life. I believe that we are in that period. And I believe 1/3 of it has already passed, and 2/3 remain, and then we are done. We're done.
So the time period from their entry into the promised land to the splitting of the kingdom was approximately 700 years. So here is that timeline right here. Here is the entry into the promised land. So the first 400 years was during the time of the judges right here, followed by King Saul, King David, and King Solomon. After the death of King Solomon, the kingdom split in 917 BCE, with 10 tribes going to the north, compiling the northern kingdom, referred to in this teaching as 10 Israel or Ephraim, and the 2 tribes of Judah, being Judah and the tribe of Benjamin, going to the south, along with the Levites. But keep in mind, there were some individuals in these tribes that really just chose a side as well. So it's not hard and fast. And we know 10 Israel went into Assyrian captivity in 721 BCE. So that's right here. So this light green section is 10 Israel. The southern kingdom lasted about 136 years longer than the northern kingdom, but were eventually exiled to Babylon. This takes us into the time period of Nebuchadnezzar's dream about a statue, which was interpreted by the Elohim of Daniel in the book of Daniel. So we have that Babylonian captivity taking place here. And this timeline is just a timeline covering a 2,000-year period until Yahusha HaMashiach would come. So Nebuchadnezzar's dream foretold of the Babylonian kingdom, of the Medo-Persia Empire, of Greece, followed by the Roman Empire, which was ruling at the time of Yahusha's birth. In addition, you see the time periods associated with the tabernacle transitioning into the first temple, and then you see the 70-year gap of the Babylonian captivity and their return to build the second temple, and eventually Herod's modification of that temple. So this gives you a general overview and how the tabernacle system, even though it was happening out here as well, it was still in place after they entered the promised land until Solomon would actually build the temple after David had started collecting the materials for that temple. So we have the Babylonian Empire, Medo-Persia, Greece, and Rome. And we know Yahusha HaMashiach was born under the empire of Rome at the time. And the book of the law was still in place, but he was going to be ushering in the book of the covenant. So this is just another timeline, and it shows the monarchy, the kings, and where they're recorded. Saul, it begins in 1 Samuel, the recording of when the people wanted a king to rule over them. And what a great insult to Yahuah. But he allowed that to take place. And of course, we know King David followed and King Solomon. And then after King Solomon's death, we have the split. Northern kingdom was exiled to Assyria. The southern kingdom eventually exiled to Babylon. And so these are the books in the Bible that cover that time period. He also brought forth that the northern kingdom, all their kings were bad. They essentially went from bad to worse. And the southern kingdom had some good and bad kings. Now, during Isaiah's time period, he prophesied to Uzziah, Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah. And he was still alive during Manasseh, we know, because Manasseh was the one that executed him. Then Matthew went over this possible time period of when we would be out of the punishment, if you will. So we should be witnessing this healing from 2010 to at the most 2038. And he went into that in great detail. And so if Yahuah does have mercy and grace, he may extend that period to possibly the year 2038. So if we look at it that way, and as he shared, this isn't thus saith the Lord, it's just a possibility based on what he gleaned from scripture. So we have a generational window of gathering, and 1/3 has passed if this comes out to be the case, and 2/3 remain, and then we're done. So part 2 is going to be about self-mastery. When emotions and thinking become balanced in him. So this study will metaphorically connect our emotions to the strength and power of a horse. And our thinking, it will be connected metaphorically to its rider, who must be able to attain self-mastery by taking hold of the reins to harness this brute force of power in perfect balance, but not too tightly, to achieve victory instead of defeat, and to perform for Yahuah's kingdom instead of performing for the world. This is a simple example, but it's something we all must comprehend and hopefully achieve. And it's a great way to remind ourselves how powerful our emotions are and how powerful our emotions can lead us astray if we just let them loose. We just focus on the emotion. And we fail to bring our thinking under submission to his spirit within us. This is huge, but it's presented in a very simplified fashion so we can see it and we can own it, and not only see it in ourselves, but see it in other people that we know and we love. And we know that power in the wrong hands is dangerous and many times lethal. In 1 Corinthians 15, 57 and 58, we read, "But thanks to Elohim, who gives us the overcoming through our master, Yahusha HaMashiach. Therefore, my beloved brothers, be steadfast, immovable, always excelling in the work of the master, knowing that your labor is not in vain in the master." So self-mastery, siege fortification, life applications for us today.
But I also want to make this a fun adventure and not get bogged down in 66 chapters over 2.5 years and have been droning on like some messianic teacher that I used to be. Okay, because the scripture is alive. It is full of vibrance and fun. And it is fun to be in the Word together. It truly is. It's invigorating. It's the best time of my life is to be in the Word. And the best time of my life is to be in the Word, not alone when I can become melancholy at home, but with you, interacting one another together. So I do want to make life application out of this teaching. So each and every week, I'm going to have a theme of mastery. That's going to be my theme, so bear with me, and I hope you're going to enjoy it with me, because I want to come to some mastery in my life over some areas of weakness that I'm aware of in myself, and I want to better myself, and I hope you want to better yourself too. So each week I'm going to look at the interpretation, the application, and the pattern. You can write that down if you want. The interpretation, the application, and the pattern, because there are specific keys to coming out from the natural man and ascending into, or attaining, I should say, the ascended self-mastery. And that's what I would want in my life, and I hope that's what you would want in your life, is attaining ascended self-mastery. Because if you can't master yourself, then what are you going around pointing out about that brother or sister's problems? We have to get the whopping planks out of our own eyes. That's all we can do. I can't change you. I can only change me. I can't change this world, but by changing me, I can change this world. Because if we all change ourselves, then we will change the way we interact and face the world. So we're going to look at interpretation, application, and pattern. Bear with me here. I've got a lot to figure out. It's been a while. Okay. So I have actually come, believe it or not, to want to work on the patterns in my life. And like I say, I hope that you will want to join with me on this study on working on the patterns. Because there are patterns in our life. We all have them. You can ignore it. Or you can start to look at the traits in your life, the patterns in your life. If we do choose to ignore them, then they will unwittingly master us. If we discover them and we heal them, then we can attain ascended self-mastery and become the prophets. Because that's all the prophets were. All the prophets were men and women who recognized their patterns, they discovered them, they healed them, and they attained ascended self-mastery so they could communicate and interface with the world in their time, and they affect massive change. Massive change. We can become the prophets. The New Testament tells us that. But we can only do that when we have attained ascended self-mastery. There is patterns in our life. There is a pattern in our life. And it's particularly visible in our mistakes and in our failures. The controlling mechanism of this pattern is what? One word. Anybody? Character. 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 The controlling mechanism in this is character. It's interesting, the etymology of character in the ancient Greek refers to an engraving stamp or instrument, because your character is deeply engraved or stamped into you, is it not? So to change something that is so deeply ingrained and stamped into you means you have to ascend to self-mastery. So character then is something that is so deeply and ingrained and stamped within us that it compels us. You often hear me talking about compelled performance. That's all this world does, is attempt to compel you to perform. And that's all that Yahuah is trying to do, is attempting you to compel us to perform. We have to literally choose in this life who this day we shall serve. Choose life or choose death. Mystery Babylon is spending every waking moment attempting to compel your performance, to perform for Mystery Babylon. And on the other hand, Yahuah is attempting through the Holy Spirit to compel you to perform to his word. That's conviction. And they both work on your character. Mystery Babylon is working on your character through fear, intimidation, coercion, and force. Yahuah is working on your character through love, mercy, compassion, and the power of the Holy Spirit, which is the healing of the nations. But it is all compelled performance. Our life is literally just, we're here just to perform. We are here to perform. That's it. It's compelled performance. That's it. Everything is compelled performance, either for the kingdom of heaven or the kingdom of earth. It's that simple. And when you see that, you go, oh my goodness, the book of Isaiah is going to open that all up. But this is something that will impact and change our life today. So character is something that is a stamping instrument that is so deeply ingrained within us that it compels us through compelled performance to act in certain ways beyond our awareness. Beyond our awareness. Let's look at the siege here, the siege, because we're going to see through Isaiah this siege language. Jerusalem is under siege right now as Isaiah is called into this ministry. And as we will discover in Isaiah, Yeshayahu, this siege is literal. Of course it's literal. But metaphorically, we are under siege as well. Literally and metaphorically. But we are the temple of the living Elohim. 1 Corinthians, Paul speaks of that. And is not our temple, is not our Jerusalem under constant siege from outside influence? When we're under siege, we need to come to a place of appreciating the siege as an opportunity to better ourselves. A siege, a conflict, is an opportunity for us to actually hone our skills of self-mastery. It's actually an opportunity to toughen yourself up. It's like exercising. And something that we do not exercise very often, that we need to exercise more, is the muscle of gratitude. Because if we exercise the muscle of gratitude, then that really opens up the key to self-mastery. But there's another muscle that is exercised more than most muscles in this world that shuts down self-mastery. And that muscle is covetousness and envy. Looking at others, Instagram, Facebook, their perfect life, their models, everything's shiny and filtered, and that's our world today. And that produces another fruit. So really, to unlock the scriptures, we need to have what? Gratitude. And we need to look to those that have less than us. And when we do that, then we can unlock our self-mastery. But if we're looking the other way, covetousness and envy, then that locks up self-mastery. You can never attain it. Does that make sense? So I want to set the stage for us. This is the introduction. There's no point us going into the book of Isaiah if we're putting filters on our Instagram and we're, My daughter started horse riding again last week, and we'd taken a period of time off. And the lady that owns the barn, she's a fabulous lady. I've known her for years, and she came up to my daughter and she said to her, "How come you are so beautiful and your father is so ugly?" And you should have seen my daughter's face. And I was like, "Oh, that's Judy. Don't worry about it. It's I just love that she says that, because she just comes right out with the truth of it, She's just teasing them. But my daughter's there. I'm like, "Oh, it's totally, of course, unfiltered." Okay? My mother would always say to me, "You are big enough and ugly enough to know better." So it doesn't offend me when people say that. It makes me laugh. It's okay. We want to be unfiltered. We truly do. Anyway, Let's look at this siege language. I digress there, bear with me. Siege language. Siege. We're under siege in our relationships. We're under siege in our culture. Your body is under siege. Your mind is under siege. We're under siege. So how do we frame ourselves each and every day? We're under siege at work. We're under siege in our marriages. We're under siege in our relationships with our children, with our grandchildren. We are under siege with the world. But these are all opportunities for self-mastery. Isaiah was under siege, but he used it as an opportunity. That is what made him a prophet. And you have the power to be the prophets in this generation if you will bear with me and trek with me and join with me, and we will do this together. This is going to change our lives. I truly believe it in this time, in this age. I want you to be as inspired as I am inspired. Realize this, Yeshayahu, Isaiah knew you can never change people's minds by arguing. You can never change people's minds by lecturing. You can never change people's minds by cajoling them, all of which makes people what? More defensive. Their guard goes up. They stick to their guns. You're not going to change them. He wasn't going to change the minds of the kings. He had to take a different trajectory.
Okay, so in that segment, he reviewed the controlling mechanism that's so deeply engraved in us is our character. So he went over the fact to change something that is so deeply ingrained or stamped in us means we must attain ascended self-mastery in Yahusha, because our character compels us, and we have to be mindful and pose the question to ourselves, are we going to be compelled to perform for Mystery Babylon, or are we going to be compelled to perform to Yahuah and let him transform our lives? In Ephesians, we read verse 13 and verse 14 of chapter 1, in whom you also, having heard the word of the truth, the good news of your deliverance, in whom also, having believed, you were sealed, you were marked, you were sealed with the set apart spirit of promise, who is the pledge of our inheritance until the redemption of the purchased possession, to the praise of his Elohim. And then we saw the muscle of gratitude. If we exercise the muscle of gratitude, then that really opens up the key to self-mastery. The muscle of gratitude, the muscle of thankfulness, the muscle of praise. And then opposite was the muscle of covetousness, the muscle that shuts down self-mastery, the muscle that reflects jealousy, resentment, malice, spitefulness, ill will, hatred, enviousness, enmity, envy, animosity, maliciousness. We've all seen that. This world is full of this muscle. And that is something that we always have to be mindful of, and not let that muscle shut us down. And then the siege language. I don't believe we've ever fully thought about how we are under siege each and every day in several ways, in several aspects, but it's really good to understand or have this analogy, how our relationships are under siege, our cultures, I mean, that's what this wicked world is doing, is it not? Playing one against the other constantly in all levels of this fallen world. Our bodies are under siege, minds, workplace, everything, every place we go, pretty much at times can be under siege. Now, part 3 is about the horse and the rider. So let's take a listen to this powerful segment. This is really a very critical point in his presentation.
Isaiah teaches us that people are naturally stubborn and resistant to influence. In Genesis, Bereshit, chapter 49, verse 17, Dan shall be a serpent by the way, an adder in the path that bites the horse's heels, so that its rider shall fall backward. What? What's that got to do with Isaiah? Right now, I'm going to teach you what the horse and rider is. Dan shall be a serpent by the way, an adder in the path that bites the horse's heels, so that its rider shall fall backward. We are talking about self-mastery, about becoming the prophets. And the only way that you can do that is mastering the horse and the rider. Emotions and thinking. Emotions and thinking. What do I mean? Dan here is a metaphor for stubbornness that gets in the way of your success. The serpent bites the emotional you. You get offended. You get hurt. You get wounded. And then pride and stubbornness materialize, and it ruins your thinking, yourself, your creativity, and then fear comes in and your IQ drops considerably, that you can no longer communicate effectively. The kings of Judah, in the context of the book of Isaiah, all responded differently to the siege. They all responded differently based upon their inner horse and rider, based upon their emotions and thinking. One example is King Ahaz. Ahaz, his response to the war between Judah and northern Israel and Syria, which was known as the Syrio-Ephraimite crisis, because 10 Israel had joined with Assyria to come down and lay siege on Judah, the kingdom of Judah. It was called the Syrio-Ephraimite crisis, okay? So he allowed opposition to rise up within himself. He allowed this conflict of his emotions and thinking to rise up, which caused him to respond with fear and unbelief. Ahaz's response to the siege was one of fear and unbelief. His thinking and his emotion became so tangled up with one another that he refused Yahuah's sign. Yahuah gave him a sign. Instead, because he let all of his emotions and thinking, he wasn't able to gain self-mastery. Ahaz was not able to gain self-mastery. His emotions and thinking became all tangled up together, that Yahuah tried to intercede into his life and give him a sign, and he wasn't able to see the sign. Instead, he rejected the sign and looked for a political solution. How many of you have come under siege in your life, and Yahuah's tried to come into your life and bring somebody into your life, or bring an opportunity into your life, or there was a flood and a boat comes by, and you've heard the story, and there you are sitting on the roof and you reject the boat because you think a helicopter's going to come in and say, but he sent you the boat. You've had all the but you can't see it. And you reject what's right before you because you're looking for a political solution. You're looking for a material solution instead of a miracle. And then you wonder why you can't move the mountain into the sea. Because our emotions, Mystery Babylon, is compelling us to be afraid every single day. Mystery Babylon is compelling us to perform to the material world of fear and mayhem and chaos. Whereas Yahuah is compelling us to perform to self-mastery and ascendancy so that we can walk on water and calm the chaos and clearly communicate as prophets to a lost world. The kings of Judah all responded differently based upon their inner horse and rider emotions and thinking. You see, change only comes by the written word, because the written word, brethren, is the law of notice. It's the law of notice. I speak of this often. I don't care if you don't believe in the Bible. I don't care if you didn't read it. Neither does Yahuah. If you go into a public park and you pass the notice board and it's got on that notice board, notice, illegal to camp between these hours, and you didn't read it and you decide to camp there, guess what? You're in violation of that, and you can be arrested. Well, I didn't read it. Too bad. It's called the law of notice. Well, I didn't receive it. Too bad. It's called the law of notice. We operate on the law of notice because that's how Yahuah operates. I don't care whether you read it. I know that you received it. I don't care whether you perform to it. Not my issue. Not Yahuah's issue. We operate on the law of notice. The written word is the law of notice. Write down your dreams. Write down your hopes. Write down your strengths. Write down your weaknesses, because the written law of notice brings change from your thoughts to the material world. It's a manifestation. It's a manifestation. Why do you think the prophets always had a scribe with them? Because they would take their thoughts and they would get their scribe to produce the law of notice. That's it. And it's an art form. It's an art form. We must produce this art form in this world of chaos, because it's the only thing that will allow you to walk on water. The law of notice is the manifestation. It makes you a prophet. It makes you a prophetic voice of your own destiny, because it is a self-fulfilling prophecy. Somebody that says, oh, this is killing me. Oh, this is self-fulfilling prophecy. I'm so sick of this. Self-fulfilling prophecy. I wake up in the morning and I speak. I speak positive affirmations over myself, over those I love, over those I pray for. I speak it because it is so. I write it down. I love writing. Exodus chapter 15, verse 1. Then sang Moshe and the children of Israel this song unto Yahuah, and spake, saying, I will sing unto Yahuah, for he hath triumphed gloriously. The horse and his rider he hath thrown into the sea. Now the sea is an allegory, a metaphor for either self-mastery or absolute mayhem. depending upon the horse and the rider, your emotions and your thinking. The sea, Yahusha had total self-mastery. Therefore, he spoke to the storm and he was able to walk on water. Jonah, he was double-minded between his emotions and his thinking. Therefore, the sea caused mayhem and chaos that he became swallowed up by it. The horse and rider is thrown into the sea. We have got to find the optimal balance of thinking and emotion by casting our horse and rider, emotion and thinking, into the sea of glass that's spoken of in Revelation, because that's where we all want to stand. Do we not? Isn't that the end game? Self-mastery under Mashiach, standing on the sea of glass. That's the goal. That is what Yahuah is compelling you to perform to. Will you take the challenge? Because that's what the book of Isaiah is going to teach us how to do. This is why I want to do the introduction. This is the purpose of the book of Isaiah, to teach you and I how to become the prophets of this generation in this last 28 years. That's what I'm saying. You don't have to believe me. I'm not saying, thus saith the Lord. I'm just saying, that's my math. And those of you who know how dreadful at math I am, you can take what I just said with a massive pinch of salt. You see, there's the caveat. But it's still my opinion. But I'm not going to make my opinion your burden. Don't make your opinion my burden either. Okay? So, I'm rusty, aren't I? Like a rusty nail. We can't, though. Now, often, when I say we, I'm speaking to me, because this is birthed out of reality in my life, okay? This is birthed out of my life. That's all I can do, is teach the word through my life and try and communicate it through experience that we've all had together. We can't just divorce emotions from thinking. The two are intertwined. What we need is balance. Just like a horse and rider. Just like a horse and rider. The horse is our emotional nature. Think about it. It is powerful. And unless it's bridled, it is the driving power of every waking moment of your day. And an unbridled horse can be extremely dangerous. So the horse is our emotional nature. It is continually compelling us, driving us. It's moving. It never stops. And if you're in your emotional nature, you will never get any rest. You ever find those people? They just can't stop. You're just like, would you shut up? All right, you know those people that they can't stand silence? All the time. You're like, good grief. And you're like, are you one of those people? No, I'm teaching right now. If I'm silent, you'll hear nothing. But I love silence. I love the silence in conversation. The horse is the emotional nature. It's continually compelling us to move. Go, 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 go. It's a beast. And this beast has tremendous power. But without the rider, it cannot be guided, can it? Without your thinking, your emotions cannot be guided. It is wild. Your emotions are wild in nature, like this beast, like this horse. Unbridled passions, unbridled lusts, unbridled fantasies. And guess what? The emotional nature is subject to vipers, by the way. It is subject to the adder in the path, the serpent, the devil. Okay? You're with me? This is taught throughout the scripture. And we're like, well, what is it? We just gloss over it. The emotional nature, an unbridled horse, will continually lead you into trouble. Can we agree on that so far? Now, the rider, on the other hand, is the thinking self. The rider is the thinking self. And through training and practice, it holds the reins and guides the emotional nature. It guides the horse. And it transforms this powerful, carnal energy into something of immense beauty and power and productivity to bring about transformational change. Think about it. I mean, have you ever seen, I get to see it twice a week, English riding. And some of you are like, oh, well, that's racist against Western riding. No, I like English riding, okay? And I'm allowed to. I like Western riding too, but something special about English riding, the way they handle the horse. It's majestic. It truly is. You don't have to hold on to the horn. There is no horn. It's all in the strength, is in the legs, and it's amazing. And it's this transformational power of taking the wild energy of emotion and mastery with thinking, and together it turns into something majestic, change. But one without the other is useless. Think about it. Without the rider, there is no directed movement or purpose. Without thinking, the emotions are just going wild. Without the rider, the horse has got no direction or purpose. It'll literally go round in circles. No direction or purpose. This is the man with all the artistic energy. And you meet these people, they've got all this artistic energy, they've got all this energetic vision, but they can never actually get it to produce anything. They're the dreamers of the world. And it's great to dream, but don't dream and not turn your dreams into reality, because that's just a bunch of emotion. They've got all the energy, but they don't have the productivity. Without the horse, there's no energy. So you can't just be a great thinker either. You have to have the emotion as well. Without the horse, there is no energy, meaning there's insufficient power. A rider holding the reins too tightly, one who's afraid to take risks or unleash the energy, that's not going to be any good either, is it? So we cannot be slaves to energy, but we must accept it. And you always hear me talking about acceptance. We accept the energy, and then we allow it to flow through us. That's what makes a really good rider, is they accept all of that energy and power from the horse, emotion, and then they allow it to flow through their minds, their thinking, and then they have something amazing. Now, if Israel had considered their actions beforehand and brought that thinking to the situation of the siege before they made a decision, then things would have been so much different for the history of Israel. Would have been so much different for the kings of Israel. But these kings that are the focus of Isaiah, their emotions and their thinking, the horse and the rider, were not in sync. The only one that was able to attain self-mastery for a while was who? Hezekiah. Thank you. Hezekiah was the only king out of these kings that attained the self-mastery for a while. But then he became like a pompous English show jumper. He became so pompous and full of himself on that horse that something happened. And what was it? Leprosy. Which then brings us all the way forward into the New Testament. And like I told you, Isaiah is the prophet that is quoted more times than any other prophet in the New Testament. And Yahusha went to the Galilee first to heal the broken kingdom. And what was the first thing that he went about doing? Healing who? What type of people? No, not the sick. Lepers. Why? Because he's telling you about Hezekiah. He's going back to this story of what we're about to go into. The whole reason lepers were healed in the New Testament is because of the sin of Hezekiah. And I'll unlock that for you as we go forward into this teaching. It is huge. This book of Isaiah is huge. Anyway, I've got so much to do. This is the intro. Hey, my goodness. Here's another metaphor for you, the ostrich. Think about this. The ostrich may look good, right? They look good. Those ostriches, they think, man, I'm looking good today. I'm one good-looking ostrich. Have you seen the size of my eggs? They're massive. That was my impersonation of, I don't know, an ostrich. But they think they're good-looking, okay? Yet they are a stupid bird, a foolish bird. The Bible says the ostrich has no Holy Spirit, no wisdom whatsoever. Job chapter 39 verse 17. Yahuah has caused that one, the ostrich, to forget wisdom. Oh, that's the proud English show jumper. Oh, I look so good. Look how big my eggs are. Look how big my feathers and my breasts are. Oh my goodness. But you've got no wisdom. All you care about is is Instagram. That's all you care about, is all your filters on Instagram. Okay? It's not reality. That doesn't even exist. Nobody looks like that. There is no wisdom to be found there. Has he not given her a share in understanding? At the time she lifts herself up on high, she scorns the horse and the rider. If you're so interested in outward appearance and filters, then that shows a lack of wisdom, and you'll never gain self-mastery over your emotions with your thinking. That's what happened to the other three kings in the time of Isaiah. They were like ostriches. They were so invested in their own plumage, their jewels, their prestige, their robes, that even when the siege was on them, they were strutting around like ostriches, so full of their power, prestige, and plumage that even when Yahuah gave them signs, they didn't have the wisdom to be able to interpret the signs. So they looked for political solutions. Brethren, this is our world today and our leaders today. It's all a facade. They don't really look like that. They're not really like that. It's a facade. It's all a mask. And they're so into the outward, there is no wisdom. Therefore, they don't see the signs of the days, the signs of the times, and they're looking for political solutions to all of the problems of this world. But they're not going to come through political solutions. They are going to come by supernatural prophecy and the signs that Yahuah is giving to his prophets, you and me. If we have the self-mastery and we can ascend from our emotions by being a horse and rider. But beware, if you do become a horse and rider, not to become proud in your plumage, because then you'll fall like Hezekiah, because he did become the horse and rider. But then he began to look at his plumage, and he became the ostrich, and he became the leper. Oh, there's so much. There's so much. The ostrich may look good, yet it is a foolish bird. It lacks wisdom. It orientates its worldview on outward things, and it is the scorn of both the emotional and thinking self, the horse and the rider.
So Matthew shared with us that Isaiah teaches right down here. Isaiah teaches us that people are naturally stubborn and resistant to influence. And that is so true with even receiving the word of Yahuah. They're naturally stubborn and resistant to influence. And so we have to be very mindful of that. And that's why we need to obtain that balance between our emotions and our thinking. And more than that, we need to bring our thinking under submission to his spirit that lives in us and through us. So Matthew broke down that scripture in Genesis 49, verse 17. And this is a good review. Dan is a metaphor for stubbornness that gets in the way of your success. The serpent bites the emotional you. You get offended, or I inserted there, triggered. That's a common word today. So you get offended or triggered, you get hurt, you get wounded. And then pride and stubbornness materializes. Why? Because your emotions are just out of whack. And because of that, it ruins your thinking. You can't think straight, your IQ drops, and you make wrong decisions. So it ruins your thinking, yourself, your creativity, and then fear. When fear comes in, you're pretty much done. Because when fear comes in, you can't hardly even think. So fear comes in and your IQ drops considerably so that you can no longer communicate effectively. And not only that, you can't even hear, you can't even receive. You are totally out of balance. So metaphorically, the kings of Judah all responded differently based upon their inner horse and rider. And the same holds true for us. The horse being our emotions and rider being the thinking. Self-mastery in Yahuah is the intertwined balance of the two that can be found in him and in him only. So the horse equals our powerful emotions and the rider equals our thinking. So that was the trap that King Ahaz fell into, and his story can be found in Isaiah 7 and in 2 Kings chapter 16. He became full of fear and unbelief based on the siege, based on his response to the siege. And even though Yahuah was sending him a sign, he couldn't see it, he couldn't hear it. No, he chose to do a political, materialistic route instead of calling his thinking under submission to Yahuah and to Isaiah, and then directing his emotions. Then Matthew also went into the law of notice. And this is extremely important because change only comes by the written word he shared. Because the written word, brethren, is the law of notice. It is the law of notice. It doesn't matter if you don't believe in the Bible nor read it, because it still stands. And he gave that example of a public park. You know, there's a posted sign, you don't read it, you can't, you're in violation of the public notice, the law of notice. It's still a violation, and they can still deal with you accordingly. And he emphasized that we need to speak words of affirmation into our lives. We need to even understand who we are. We need to write down our dreams, our hopes, strengths, and weaknesses. And maybe we need to ask someone closest to us what they would add to our list, because we don't want to fool ourselves. That's the worst person you can fool, is to fool yourself. So we need to watch our words, watch what we say, what we write, speak words of affirmation, write them down. And this is an area I need to improve on. I need to write and speak words of affirmation. And then he gave the example of how the account of Exodus 15. And when they sang and praised Yahuah. And that is bringing all of the people in one accord and praising Yahuah. When you sing and praise to Yahuah, as we did at the beginning of our gathering, the whole atmosphere changes. And they sang, he is highly exalted. The horse and its rider, he has thrown into the sea. So they emphasize, Yah is my strength and song, and he has become my deliverance. He cloaked them with his deliverance. The sea is an allegory for either self-mastery or absolute mayhem, depending upon the horse and the rider's emotions and thinking. And we saw for Pharaoh and his troops, the sea became an absolute mayhem and chaos, a sea of death. The sea, for Yahusha, he had total self-mastery. Therefore, he spoke to the storm. Our words are powerful. And he was able to walk on water by faith. Jonah, in the other instance, he's double-minded. What does the Bible say about a double-minded individual? The double-minded individual is unstable in all of his ways, between his emotions and his thinking. Therefore, the sea caused mayhem and chaos. He became swallowed up by it. That's how powerful and that's how important it is for us to get balance between our emotions and our thinking, and call our thinking, our thoughts, take every thought captive and bring it under submission to Yahusha HaMashiach. Go according to the word, even though we may think of other avenues. No, you have to bring it under submission to his word. You have to bring it under submission to his covenant. So we have to find that optimal balance of thinking and emotion by casting our horse, he shared, our emotions, and our rider, our thinking, into the sea of glass that is spoken of in Revelation. This is powerful. This is powerful. And we may think, well, this is very simplistic. No, it's not. No, it's not. So self-mastery is that intertwined balance found in him, and the balance between our emotions and our thinking. Without the rider, the thinking, the beast of emotions cannot be harnessed. That's a very dangerous predicament. If not harnessed and reined in, it is subject to the serpent by the way. It's running wild. It's opening you up for harm. But of course, we don't want to rein in too tightly. Again, it's balance. The rider is the thinking self and holds the reins and guides the horse of emotions into transformational power and change. Look how small that young girl is riding that horse. She's balanced with that powerful beast. She's confident. She's thinking. She's guiding. And the horse equals our powerful emotions. By accepting and mastering the energy, which that young girl has accomplished, we can let that energy flow through us. And look at the peace upon her face. She is at peace. She's not fearing. She's enjoying herself and the power of that beautiful beast. One without the other is useless. Without the rider, without thinking, there is no directed movement or purpose. This is the man with all the artistic energy and energetic vision that can never quite turn them into reality. And he brought forth that Uzziah accomplished self-mastery for a season. Now, he did misspoke and mentioned Hezekiah, but he meant Uzziah. And in a way, Yahuah works everything out for good for those that love him and are called according to his purpose. And personally, I didn't know much about Uzziah until this time that he misspoke. And then it made me read more about Uzziah. And now I kind of own who Uzziah was. And Uzziah set us an example of self-mastery. And he was 16 years old when he began the reign. And he was very successful because he obeyed Yahuah. However, as Matthew brought out, Uzziah had his mistakes and failures be pride and punishment, because at a certain point, he let his emotions become out of balance with his thinking being guided by Yahuah, and didn't have that listening ear to the prophet Isaiah. And because of that, he wouldn't even listen to what the priests were telling him. He just became stubborn, and he went against how Yahuah was trying to reach him, shake him out of it. But no, he doubled down, and he had a censer in his hand to burn incense. And while he was wroth with the priest, those emotions, I'm wroth, leprosy broke out on his forehead before the priest in the house of Yahuah beside the incense slaughter place. And he remained a leopard for the rest of his life. Proverbs chapter 16, verse 15 through 18. In the light of a sovereign's face is life, and his delight is like a cloud of the latter rain. How much better it is to get wisdom than gold. Wisdom is from above. Wisdom is from the Ruach. Gold is very materialistic. And to get understanding in your thinking is preferable to silver. The highway of the straight is to turn away from evil. He who guards his life watches over his way. Before destruction, like in the case of Uzziah, comes pride. And before a fall, like in the case of Uzziah, comes a haughty spirit. And lastly, in this segment, we don't want to become like the ostrich, full of fluff and no stuff. Part 4 are added details.
We'll finish up here with a few important details. Let's look at the name Isaiah, Yeshayahu. Isaiah, now the Isaiah scroll is found amongst the Dead Sea Scrolls, found in 1947. of course, in the Qumran caves. There is the Isaiah scroll in the Dead Sea Scrolls, and it follows the short form of the name that was popular in the time of Yeshua, the short form of Yahusha. So in the time of Yahusha, in the 1st century, they were using Aramaic or short forms of the Hebrew. Okay? So Yeshua being the short form of Yahusha, or Yahushua, depending on how you want to pronounce that. Yeshua, styled as Yod, Shin, Ayin, Yod, Hey, is the short form. His true name is Yeshayahu. Yeshayahu, which is styled slightly differently, and you'll see it's got the additional wa on the end. It's styled Yod, Shin, Ayin, Yod, Hey, Wa, Yeshayahu. So that's the long form, and the short form is Yeshayah, without the hu. Got that? Okay, so just to clarify, what does that mean? Yah has saved. That's what his name means. Yah has saved. Yah has saved. Now, despite Yeshayahu, Isaiah's thundering chastisements and visions of looming catastrophe and looming destruction for the Jewish people, this book is really about comfort. It really is. And that's what we'll see in the latter chapters. It's about comfort. And it's reflected in the famous John the Immerser, John the Baptist text of Isaiah 40, which is Nachamu, Nachamu in the Hebrew. Comfort ye, my people. Comfort ye, my people. London Philharmonic Orchestra does the best rendition of that. I believe Handel's Messiah. Comfort ye, my people. I love that. It's fabulous. Now, Isaiah, his lifespan, he lived quite long, 120 years. And he was killed by Manasseh, the son and successor of Hezekiah. Hezekiah's son Manasseh killed Isaiah. How did he kill him? By turning him upside down, spreading his legs asunder, and getting a saw and cutting him in half. Outrageous behavior. He was killed by Manasseh, the son and successor of Hezekiah to the throne of the kingdom of Judah. It's so sobering. There's some amazing, in Europe, you can go to a lot of the prayer houses and cathedrals, and you'll see the depictions of Isaiah the prophet being sawn in half. And there's various ways in which they depict it, but I think the most graphically gruesome is the one that I've just described to you, of how he was cut asunder. Isaiah was sawn asunder on a wooden saw after the prophet had hidden himself in a hollow tree from the angry king Manasseh. There's no guarantees in life except one, which is what? Persecution. In Hebrews, in the 11th chapter and the 37th verse, it actually speaks of the martyrdom of Yeshayahu, Isaiah. It is written, they were stoned, the prophets, they were stoned, they were sawed in two. There you go. Were tempted, they were slain with sword. They wandered about in sheepskins and goatskins, being destitute, afflicted, and tormented. He died in the first year of Manasseh's reign, which was 3,228 to 3,283 before the Common Era. Isaiah lived 308 to 3,108, tripping on my words here, to 3,228 before the Common Era. So this places the end of his life and prophecy about 110 years before the destruction of the temple and before the Babylonian captivity. to kind of give you a time frame of when this was. But he had such tremendous vision. I mean, he foresaw, think about this. He foresaw the destruction of the northern kingdom, the siege on Jerusalem. He foresaw the destruction of the temple. He foresaw the exile of the southern kingdom to Babylon for 70 years. I mean, he was at this epic time. Brethren, I suggest to you, if you can truly get into self-mastery and ascend out of just riding along as a horse, but become the horse and rider on the sea of glass, you're going to see that you and I live in such times. But we have to be the horse and rider. We have to master that, and that's what this book is about. We'll finish up with 10 Israel, commonly known as Ephraim. Now, the destruction of the northern kingdom, it occurred during Isaiah's lifetime, and it began in 3205, and it ended in 3215 with the exile of the 10 tribes. Now, this occurred in 3 stages. The first stage was the Assyrian invasion, where the truck broke, or I should say the wagon, because there weren't trucks around there in those days. Okay, the wagon broke in Galilee, because that was the land of Zebulun and Naphtali, and their northern kingdom, the king of Assyria at that time was Tiglath-Pileser, or however you pronounce it. Pilsner, Tiglath-Pilsner. Yes, it was a Pilsner. He invented Pilsners. No, I'm kidding. Didn't even crack a smile at my English joke. Tiglath-Pilsner, he came... Sorry, let's be serious. Could somebody help me with that pronunciation? Tiglath-Pileser. Pileser. That's how I'm going to say it with my dreadful accent there. But anyway, the northern king came down into the land of Zebulun and Naphtali, which was the land of Galilee, which is where the 10 northern tribes were first taken out into the exile. So therefore, when the exile is going to be healed and Yahusha comes, where's he first going to go? To the area where the wagon or truck broke, the Galilee. That was the first stage, of course, of the exile. The second stage of the exile was the invasion by the Assyrian king Tiglath-Pileser, together with King Pul, in the land of Reuben, Gad, and Manasseh. Those were the next tribes to go. And then the third invasion was the wholesale invasion of the land of Israel by the Assyrian king Shalmaneser, followed a few years later by Sancherib. And this was in 2 Kings chapter 15 and 1 Chronicles 5. You can read that. So that's when the Assyrian invasion and the 10 northern tribes were taken captive. That's very important to give you a historical frame of what we're looking at. Now, Isaiah, he did prophesy during the reign of the 4 Judean kings, and those 4 kings were Uzziyahu in the Hebrew, or Uzziah, Jotham, Hebrew, or commonly called in the King Jimmy, Jotham, Ahaz, or Ahaz, and, of course, Hezekiah. And those 4 kings reigned for a total of 113 years. That's the context of the 4 kings right here. We'll finish up now with Hezekiah and the leprosy and the earthquake, because that will kind of set the stage for us. So remember I told you, King Hezekiah, he ascended into self-mastery. He got the rider emotion, and he got his thinking. He got the horse, emotion, and his thinking, the rider, to work together, and he was able to do amazing things. But then, like a proud English jockey, he became so enthralled with his own plumage.
Okay, they had technical difficulties at that point, so we'll wrap up in section 5. But he shared in this segment that Isaiah's name means Yah has saved. And Isaiah died about 110 years before the destruction of the temple and the Babylonian captivity. So he saw all of the destruction of the northern kingdom, the destruction of the temple, the exile of the southern kingdom, the exile of also the southern kingdom being in Babylon for 70 years. So he was at this epic time, but the kings did not heed the prophecies and did not turn from their wicked ways. They were driven by their emotions, the horse without the rider, without the biblical reasoning. They were performing for the world and not for Yahuah. So Isaiah died about 110 years before the destruction of the first temple. Part 5, lessons from Uzziah's successes and failures. Our goal should be to look at the patterns in our lives and learn from them. So that's what we should be about. Look at our life, look at our patterns, and we learn most from our mistakes and our failures. We often can identify our weaknesses when we look at those very mistakes and failures, or we can avoid pitfalls by learning from the mistakes and failures of others, like we see in his written word. Those examples, it kind of gives us encouragement and hope too, because hey, we're not the only one that mess up. We're not the only ones that make mistakes and have failures. So now that we are obtaining this foundational introduction, you will notice more and more examples of leaders in the Bible that became unbalanced between their emotions and their thinking. Personally, I thought of Elijah, recorded in 1 Kings 19, how he started having a huge pity party. I have been very jealous for Yahuah, Elohim of hosts, for the children of Israel, because they have forsaken your covenant. And Yahuah shakes them out of that. And he says, go, return on your way to the wilderness of Damascus, and you shall go and anoint and do all the things he tells them to do. But thankfully, Elijah got control of all those emotions that he was feeling. And again, the account of Elisha and his servant, when the enemy was surrounding them, that's recorded in 2 Kings 6, verses 15 through 17. And the servant of the man of Elohim rose early and went out and saw an army surrounding the city with horses and chariots. And his servant said to him, "Oh, my master, what do we do?" Was he not full of emotions? And he answered, "Do not fear." Boom. He targeted the problem. Do not fear. For those who are with us are more than those who are with them. And Elisha prayed. What did Elisha do? He saw the emotions. What does he do? He turns to Yahuah and he says, "Yahuah, I pray, open his eyes and let him see." And Yahuah opened the eyes of the young man, and he looked and saw the mountain covered with horses and chariots of fire all around Elisha. And then, of course, we have the example of the Apostle Paul, because at first he was so full of emotions. He was so zealous. He was so passionate. He had so much power in his horse of emotions that he persecuted the believers ruthlessly. Yet, when Yahusha woke him up on the road to Damascus, changed his thinking to be in alignment with his word, Yahuah's word. Now, Paul thought he was on track with his thinking, but he wasn't. He wasn't on track. He had stinking thinking, and he was being influenced by the world until that experience on the road to Damascus.
We're back. All right. So I was just finishing up, and I was talking about Hezekiah and how he had ascended into self-mastery. He got upon the horse. He mastered his emotions, the horse, with his thinking, and became the rider. But then he became so full of his plumage like the ostrich that he lacked wisdom, that he was struck down by leprosy. And this is my very big concern in this day, because Hezekiah could not comprehend the book of the law and book of the covenant dichotomy. He misread that there is a distinction and that there was a break and a breach of covenant. He believed that it was all muddled together, just like the Messianics and the traditional Orthodox Jews, that there's no distinction between the book of the law and the book of the covenant. So Hezekiah believed that he was the Melchizedek. He believed that the book of the covenant was in effect, and that he was a king and a priest. Hezekiah made that grave mistake. He put himself in the position of the Melchizedek. He misread the prophecies of Melchizedek and the coming of the Melchizedek by believing that he was the Melchizedek, both king and priest. So what did he do? He brought an offering into the temple despite the fact that he was under the book of the law. He was not a priest, and therefore he was prohibited from doing such a thing. He was prohibited from doing it, but he did not understand that. And so he was struck with tazarat or tazaras, leprosy, right on his forehead as he was in the temple and about to make his offering. He was utterly incapacitated from that point on, and he was cursed. But he was still in power. He was still in power. But his royal duties were carried out only in his name by his son Manasseh, by his son and eventual successor to the throne. And at the very time he was struck on the forehead of leprosy, what happened? There was a great earthquake. And it occurred at its very epicenter was where? The temple in Jerusalem. And you find this in Isaiah chapter 6, verse 4. And it's also mentioned by the prophet Amos in Zechariah chapter 14, verse 5. Now, I'm just checking here because, like I said, did I say Hezekiah? I meant, I apologize. I think I got it was Uzziah. I'm getting all of my Hebrew words mixed up. Uzziah was struck. It was Uzziah was stricken with leprosy. So I retract that. I said Hezekiah, I meant Uzziah was stricken with leprosy during his reign, and he remained a leper for the rest of his life, 25 years. So, forgive me, Uzziah, hopefully we can retract that there, Uzziah, and this was, of course, the big problem that we saw. Now, at the time of being struck down with this leprosy, there was this earthquake that happened at the very same time. So you have to wonder, then in the New Testament, the Brit Hadashah, when the true king and priest under the order of Melchizedek, who has the actual rights to go and make an offering of himself, what does he do? He heals the lepers, and at the very time that his offering is accepted, there is an earthquake in the temple. Everything that broke with Uzziah was healed by Messiah. He went to heal the lepers because Uzziah was struck with leprosy, and the earthquake that breached through leprosy, that earthquake was a recognition of the acceptance of Yahusha's position as the Melchizedek king and priest. Let me continue on and finishing up here. So these are very important times, because why do you think Yahusha heralded the words of Isaiah the prophet specifically regarding the usurping of the Melchizedek order, the sins and accompanying signs of Uzziah? Because in Matthew chapter 4, it says, lepers are cleansed. The poor have the good news proclaimed to them. The veil of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom, and the earth quaked. Matthew 27. This is all a reversion of the signs of Uzziah. Are we right with Uzziah? Yes. All right. Phew. Good grief. Well, you've got to admit, I mean, we've got Uzziah, Hezekiah, Huzakuza, Hazawa, Uzi. I mean, it's goodness gracious me. I grew up south of London. I mean, and here I am. My goodness. I mean, some of you grew up in California, and the only Uzi you knew was the one that was running around down the grocery stores at night trying to rob the 7-Elevens, right? And now we're like, Uzi Yahoo. And you're like, Uzi what? Good grief. Anyway, bear with me. I'm an anglicized man in an anglicized world. So the very two signs of the prophecy now come into full effect in the New Testament. My point, which is why Isaiah is quoted so much in the New Testament. The inauguration of the true one who could go into the temple as a king and a priest. It wasn't Uzziah. It was Yahusha. He healed the wounds of Israel. He healed the chastisements, the catastrophes of Isaiah. So the inauguration of Yahusha's ministry after dealing with Satan is to usher in what Uzziah or Uzziyahu tried but never had the authority to do. To heal the wounds, to heal the chastisements and catastrophes of Isaiah's visions realized. And this is why this is so powerful. To conclude, Luke chapter 4, verse 18 is a quote of Isaiah chapter 49, verse 8, and Isaiah chapter 61, verse 1. The Spirit of the Master Yahuah is upon me, because he has anointed me to proclaim the Besorah, the good news to the poor. He has sent me to heal the brokenhearted, to proclaim deliverance to the captives and new sight to the blind, and to set at liberty those having been crushed. Our Messiah, Yahusha, did everything that Uzziah wanted to do, but did not have the authority to do, which meant that Uzziah was struck down with leprosy, and the sign of the covenant breach, that he was not the Melchizedek, was an earthquake. So the sign that Yahusha, his sacrifice was accepted, is that he would heal the leprosy from Uzziah's head, put upon the children of Israel, the outcasts. And when his sacrifice was accepted on Golgotha, that in the very same place, there would be an earthquake to recognize the healing of the breach, which is why the prophet Isaiah is quoted more than any prophet in the book of the New Testament, the books of the New Testament. And the opening proclamation of Yahusha's ministry was what? What I just read to you in Luke chapter 4, verse 18, because it's all right here. And we're going to be delving into it over the next goodness knows how long. Isaiah's prophecy was delivered over 86 years. There are so many layered literary structures to this, which change the rules to interpreting it. I mean, we've got from historical prophecy to present prophecy. So how do we determine what is historical and what prefigures the present? How are we going to navigate this? We've got codes, we've got types, we've got code names. We need to match up the ancient nations and persons that Isaiah mentions with their modern counterparts for us to be able to bring this forward into this age. For example, we've got ancient Assyria, which is a militaristic world power from the north that conquered the ancient world, and its rival superpower, Egypt. Or is there a militaristic power today from the north that seeks to conquer its rival superpower? Is there such a thing going on today? Well, then, would those prophecies, could they allude to such a thing? Does another prophet make mention of such nations and powers as a second witness? Maybe Daniel, maybe Jeremiah. You see, Isaiah is about events that aren't just confined to the Middle East. We must look at the character sketches of the people and the nations that Isaiah provides, not necessarily just be stuck with their names. I mean, it's typical. You've got types and shadows. You've got logical views. Isaiah is qualified to flit from historical to present because he wrote the words declaring the end from the beginning. He wrote those words, and from the past things which were not done. Isaiah 46 verse 10. If there was ever a prophet that could flit from the past to the present, who would be qualified to do that, would it not be Isaiah? Declaring the end from the beginning and from the past things which were not done. He saw the end from the beginning. He was able to capture both the past and the present day in a single prophecy. That's pretty powerful, isn't it? I mean, who can do such a thing? We have to look at the typological view to see the present, as well as the logical view to see the past. So we're going to be going with a typical logical view, types and shadows, as well as logical. We're not going to divorce one for another, but we're not going to just get stuck with logic and reason. We have to use types and shadows too. Old is also new, and new is also old. He uses the types from the past to prophesy into today. And I see it. I really do, and I hope you can see it too. Egypt matches, it does match modern day America, most precisely allowing only for several major events to develop within these next 20 odd years, if Moshiach does tarry that long. Now, ascending spiritual levels as we move through the text, we move through the prophecies, we will move through history. And we can look at the linkages in the way our society is today. I mean, there's trouble at home, is there not? There's trouble in the homeland. There's trouble abroad. There's hostilities from the north. We've got border encroachments upon all of our flanks. We have a very, very polarized populace, do we not? We've got apostasy, we've got judgment, we've got restoration, we've got salvation. All of these things were happening during the siege. Now, according to the prophet, our end-time religion, just like Judah's religion pre-Babylon, had become so degraded, and its followers were the very catalysts of Yahuah's judgments because they had become so degraded. I was disgusted at how the church failed during the pandemic. Failed, utterly failed its people. Disgusted. Why? Because most of them signed on for benefits and privileges to become a 501c3. They're in cahoots with the government. So they went along, they were compelled to perform to that contract. They failed us. They remained silent. That's just exactly what happened during the days of Isaiah. And that brought about Yahuah's judgment. Their religion and the adherence to that religion had become so degraded, so lukewarm, so part of the culture that they accepted the abnormalities of the culture as normal. And that was the catalyst for judgment. I believe we can see that today. In a nutshell, Israel's ancient apostasy typifies an end-time apostasy, with salvation reserved for a few that do repent. It's called a remnant. There's leprosy. There's earthquakes that await those who align with the world, that await those that align with the wrong priesthood. They'll be going right up to Jerusalem, following another Uzziah, who'll go into the temple and think that he can offer sacrifices, and they'll all be happy clapping along with the Zionists and the synagogue of Satan. And guess what? They'll end up lepers with judgment because they're not able to discern the difference between the book of the covenant and the book of the law, the Levitical priesthood and the Melchizedek priesthood. That's the danger and the peril that Isaiah warns us. Don't become an Uzziah, Uzziyahu. Avoid the Uzi at all costs. Salvation, though, does await for those who dwell with the one and only qualified king who is also a priest. It's not Uzziyahu, but it is Yahusha HaMashiach, the good news revealed.
So we know that prophecies are fulfilled 2 to 3 times throughout the Bible. In the first 5 books of the Bible, we have the Torah, and we see prophecies fulfilled. We see then them repeated many times in the prophets and the writings, and then in the Brit Hadashah, the New Testament. So he brought out that Uzziah did not have the authority to perform kingly and priestly duties. Yes, he was a king, but he had no authority to perform the priestly duties. Now we saw that Yahusha did, because the lepers were cleansed, the poor were brought the good news, the earth was shaken and the rocks were split. Yahusha was the Melchizedek, and Yahusha gave us the Great Commission. And what did he say? All authority has been given unto me, therefore go. Hello. He has given us authority as his kingdom of priests. And so this is a very special time to live in, and a very special privilege to bring those offerings of intercessory prayers before his throne room and intercede for Israel, his people. So Yahusha was able to usher in what Uzziah had desired to do, but he had no authority to do. And that was reviewed in Luke chapter 4:18, quoting Isaiah 49 and Isaiah 61, because Isaiah was the one that saw the end from the beginning. He is able to capture both the past and the present day in a single prophecy. And we too, one day, will see a massive outpouring of his Ruach HaKodesh, giving us the authority and the ability to this very day to heal the lepers, to see the blind see, and bless many people. And through those miracles, many will become believers in the one true living Elohim. So blessings to all, and Shabbat Shalom.